There's not a lot of obscurity in modern fighting games, between the internet being such a great platform for people to share niche interests and most entries in the genre being from enduring franchises. There isn't much demand for me to talk about Geese, Howard, and Soul Bad Guy after all. Unless there is? I assume most folks watching these videos know more than enough about the most popular fighting games characters, but let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. Either way, it can be difficult to find a fighter from the last 10 years to talk about in depth on this show. Well, one I'm willing to cover, anyway. I almost made this episode about Vanguard Princess, which sounds like a completely innocent game, but it made me uncomfortable. Thankfully, this gave me the opportunity to try out another fighting game that's been gathering dust in my library for some time. I'm Eric J. Chucky, and welcome to Violent Profiles, where we discuss obscure fighting games and the rosters that define them. Today we're talking about 2016 PC fighter Verdict Guilty by UK-based studio Retro Army Limited. Unlike a lot of hidden gems we cover on this show that require you to have a functioning retro console or engage in a little of the old yar-har fiddle-dee-dee, you can just buy this game on Steam for $5. It's obviously inspired by Street Fighter 2, but unlike many clones that came out back in the 90s, this game has the advantage of seeing what did and didn't work in every game before it. The controls felt a little loose at first, but the longer I played, the more comfortable I was dropping cross-ups and executing combos with fluidity. I love the retro aesthetic, right down to a limited palette mostly focused on shades between blue and red, with the occasional orange or green highlight. You can unlock different modes, each character has their own role in the interconnected story with dialogue and cutscenes, and it's just fun to play. For the price, it's a steal. The whole thing was inspired by Guile's glitch throw handcuffing the opponent in the arcade version of Street Fighter 2, so if you're playing a good guy in police-themed Verdict Guilty, the goal is to literally handcuff your opponent and defeat them while they're detained. If you're a bad guy, you get a special effect as part of your attack, like a disorienting strike or a timed explosion dealing massive damage. Before we get into it, I feel the need to point out that I am not Korean, nor do I speak the language. I've done my best to track down proper pronunciations of these names, but the internet and I are both fallible, so if you know better, I'd be happy to receive constructive criticism in the comments. The long and short of the plot is that unplayable politician/crime boss Sang is looking to take over the South Korean setting of Neo Seoul with his briefcase flamethrower/machine gun and a lot of hired muscle. His plan is complicated and multifaceted, including faking a UFO crash, or did he, and hiring a cult of mad bombers to cause havoc in the streets. As a final boss, he's pretty enjoyable, especially since money falls out of him sometimes when he takes damage. My fight money! Hilarious. As for the playable characters, let's start with the babyface Shiwoo, a relatively young officer who wants to do his father Dae-soo proud. Each character has an unlockable alternate outfit of another person who has a role in the collective tale, but only one of them has a proper story to follow. In this case, Shiwoo goes on a mission to uncover corruption in Neo Seoul's police department while Dae-soo offers initial training and acts as a minor fight in many of the other characters' stories. Shiwoo is a little simple-minded for my tastes, but his father has entrusted him with the ancient art of pigeon fu. If Shiwoo manages to defeat the nefarious Sang, peace and order are restored to the force, and he meets his father for their weekly Friday morning training. On the side of the criminal element, Jay is a chain-smoking, break-dancing Yakuza with an Uzi. Most characters in the game have an ability that draws in their ammunition as seen below their character portrait. Fire so many times and you have to reload, which I really like as a way to keep the Hadouken spam to a minimum. Looking at you, Deadshot. What's more is many of the ammo attacks are slightly different to give each character their own unique feel. Anyhow, Jay is charged with kidnapping a child to force one of the members of the police force to do Sang's bidding. The kid inspires him to question his life choices, and when he finds out his brother Sapporo killed their father to become boss of their gang, he's filled with burning determination to make things right. Defeating Sang and Sapporo sees Jay assume leadership and commit to turning the gang around to support the city and do good. Like Ryuji in Saint Young Men.
Yes!
Back on the side of the law, or at least something that resembles it, we have Reese, a black-suited foreigner who would probably like you to think he works for a major government organization. In reality, he seems to be one of many UFO-chasing nutjobs in town to investigate the crash Sang faked. He spends most of his journey chasing his friend Bob, who had a full-on alien freakout and ran off through the city yelling about voices in his head and the little one. Thing is, I'm not sure these characters are agents of any government or even human at all. They have blue blood, extendo arms, and do this instead of reloading. Like, I get the Dulcim reference, obviously, but I'd really like to know more about what the hell is going on with these Men in Black wannabes within the universe of Verdict Guilty.
That's why they put the I in FBI.
Johann is a member of a terrorist cult specializing in bombs, acid, and hallucinogens. While his specials are pretty strong, his normals are the second most frustrating in the game to use. He's a student of Sun Ki, who had set up a cult of fellow mad bombers with the goal of waking up the city. This is, of course, a ruse to do wicked deeds for Sang, which Johann eventually discovers. After confronting his master and the man behind it all, he decides to go home and think about his life choices. It's interesting how there are 4 criminal characters, and yet none of them are very committed to crime in their story mode endings. Sure, some of them were set up or victims of circumstance, but then there's Johann, who joined a cult about blowing shit up because he really likes blowing shit up. Or he wanted to feel like he belonged, I guess. I don't know, man. You want to feel like you're a part of something, you join a book club or start doing drugs, not explode your hometown. I feel like Johann's ending should have him running the cult now, and they dedicate themselves to mass destruction for mass destruction's sake. Or at least engage in some jazzy rambling like the evil midnight bomber what bombs at midnight.
He says to me, "You got style, baby. But if you're gonna be a real villain, you gotta get a gimmick." And so I says, "Yeah, baby, a gimmick, that's it. High explosives."
The only female character in the game is Minso, while on her counterpart Mia. They're both traffic cops in Neo's Soul, with Minso charging through the city looking for her dog and accidentally uncovering Sang's plot, and Mia being a pawn in the game whose child Jay kidnapped as a bargaining chip. She attacks with her ammo-using stun gun and the aforementioned doggo Charlie. She's also the owner of a move gratuitously dubbed Panty Shot. I'll let you work out on your own which one that is. It's less than inspiring for 3 of the 4 heroic characters to be kind of idiots who accidentally slapstick their way through the plot, but I think the heel characters make up for it. Take Gunn, for example. He was set up by someone for the murder of the chief of police, which was basically the tipping point for this whole situation. He and his pals bust out of prison and he goes on a rampage through the city to find the guy who sold him out and make him pay. Of course, this leads into Sang, but the real culprit who committed the crime was his best friend and cellmate, Konu. Gunn is happy to go back to jail because it means he'll be able to punish Sang and Konu and perhaps help them mend their wicked ways. His name is rather ironic, of course. Gunn has a complete lack of projectile attacks, including any moves that use ammo. It'd be like naming the boxer in Street Fighter Kick, which is another thing Gunn cannot do. In exchange for this, he hits like an absolute beast, and his rolling attack is one of the most easily abused in the game. Still, after having used so many other characters, his lack of a real cross-up option made me spend more time on completing his story than anyone else, getting me especially stuck on the fight against Konu. The most compelling hero was the first one I played, and a decent introduction to the game's mechanics, Kyung. A disgraced alcoholic detective, he's been a wreck since the love of his life, Chio, was murdered. Despite the insistence of Toyun, his friend on the force, he goes out in search of her killer, who is eventually revealed to be Johann. Again, a guy who probably shouldn't have had the go home and rethink my life ending. Much like in The Crow, Kyung wants to take out the man who ordered the hit, and that means Sang. He offers Sang redemption, but the bastard refuses and says he's too old, but there may yet be hope for Kyung. Flowers in hand, he visits Chia's grave and ponders the future. Kyung's tale is treated with more respect than a lot of the others, and I could absolutely see him as the protagonist of a badass late 80s crime thriller. I would in fact love to see that. Before we get to my absolute favorite character, I'd like to talk about Sabu. No, not him. Why do you always think it's someone not from the game? Who's editing these videos anyhow?
Am I a stinker?
Sabu in this context is the goofy police quartermaster and dummy for the training mode who is Sang's inside man. He has a dog of his own and a freaking shotgun, so he makes a pretty formidable opponent, especially during some of the challenge rounds where you're meant to avoid the character or defeat them under certain restrictions like low health or a time limit. He wears a lot of hats in the story of Verdict Guilty, from mentor to arms dealer to betrayer. The most positive role he plays is in Hyuk's story. Our final villain, we catch up with Hyuk in the middle of a bank robbery where his partner Ye Jun takes the money and runs. Hyuk loads up and chases him down, making a few friends and enemies along the way until finally confronting Sang and getting back what he rightfully stole. Money in hand, he returns to Sabu and pays his debts for all the guns he's bought on credit over the years, then visits his mother in hospital to pay for her expensive medical treatments. It might land in a cheesy way, but I appreciate the message the story delivers. You never know what drives someone to do bad things, and it's not always evil in their hearts that takes them to these extremes. The best part about Hyuk, however, is his moveset. There's a lot to love between his firearm being an assault rifle that uses all its ammo at once, his dash where he hits his opponent with the butt of his gun, and his incredible rolling grenade trap. But the real money is in his normals. Hyuk's diving kick can be spammed several times in one jump to whittle down an enemy's health, and unlike Johan, he can easily bounce an opponent back into his grenade after planting it. Plus, I don't know, look at him. He's the second most stereotypical robber in fiction next to the goon in the striped pajamas and black eye mask. Inspired. Verdict Guilty was a fun little fighting game I packed almost 5 hours into the first time I sat down to play it, and I could see myself picking it up again to check out what else could be unlocked, or to try my hand at some of its other modes. I can only imagine how fun it is to play against a friend, and I encourage you to pick it up for yourself. That's all for now. Next time on Violent Profiles, let's head back to the 90s and check out some of the characters you haven't heard of from an interesting little title that made many of us exclaim, "God bless the ring." If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and support us on Patreon at the $10 tier to get new episodes a month early. Shout out to all the names currently on screen for doing exactly that. Until next time, White out.